Hello, it's very nice to speak to you, though sadly I can't see you. I hope you're all well and finding good things to do in this very restricted time. I'm really sorry that we can't meet, but many weeks ago, in fact, I thought of devising a programme which I couldn't do in the normal way, and I mentioned, you may remember, that there would be an unusual programme, and it never actually happened because it took me quite a while to get it sorted and organised. However, here we are now, and this is the programme, and it lends itself to this kind of video treatment. I wanted to investigate a particular subject, but there are few recordings which are suitable available, and so that was a problem. I couldn't make up a compilation CD in the usual way. Now, to begin with, I had to learn how to do this, starting with making up with creating a YouTube channel, which was actually quite easy. And as a result, now there are 12 videos, numbered 1 to 12, this first, and if you follow them in sequence, you get the whole program. It's quite a long program. It's longer than our usual 2 hours minus tea and coffee time, though not hugely longer. But then you can take it over a number of days if you want, or miss bits out, or whatever you like. This program is quite unlike any other I've done, not only in its form but also in its content, and it centres not only on music but on the social history out of which the music grew. The central figure is a man called William Marshall. I wouldn't be surprised if you haven't heard of him. So I'm going to start by telling you who he was and what his life was like. He was born in Fochabers in 1748, one of a number of children to poor parents, and very little is known about his childhood, though it is known that he went to school, the town school, for 6 months. That was just all he was at school for, 6 months. At the age of 12, he joined the staff at Gordon Castle, just to the west of Fochabers, which sits just outside the town, and he was a houseboy. This was the very lowest rank in the domestic staff of the castle, and this day would be long and tiring, the tasks menial, demanding and tedious. But he was a bright boy, and he rose fairly quickly through the ranks of domestic servants. Influential adults at the castle, for example, a minister called the Reverend John Anderson, an Italian scientist called Signor Rani, they helped him, and they fed his appetite for knowledge, particularly of a practical, scientific nature. This was the time of the Scottish Enlightenment, the second half of the 18th century, the early part of the 19th, and there was a thirst for intellectual and cultural exploration. The teenage Marshall, with his quick, eager mind, benefited. He became very skilled in mathematics and in astronomy, and turned his mind to practical aspects of science such as mechanics and engineering. The fourth Duke of Gordon, William Marshall's master, was only 1 year older than he was. As a child, he bore the title Marquis of Huntly. In fact, the moment he was born, he was Marquis of Huntly. And then suddenly, at the age of 9, he became the Duke on the death of his father, Cosmo. As it happened, it turned out that Marshall and the Duke had many interests in common, so that remarkably, as time went on, their intellectual paths merged. And although William Marshall was always a servant, and the Duke was always a Duke, as adults they spoke on equal terms about these matters, which fascinated them both. In his teenage years, however, Marshall must hardly ever have seen the Duke. He'd had his 6 months schooling, he was now a houseboy in the castle, but the Duke was for most of his time elsewhere, because he went to school down south in Eton College. Anyway, one of these videos will take as its subject the Duke, so more about him later. William Marshall was multi-talented. He rose eventually to the most senior position on the staff of the castle, that of house steward, a post he held until he was 42 years old, when his life moved in a different direction. He had oversight of the other servants and was responsible for the management of all aspects of life at the castle. Sometimes the Gordon family would move away for extended stays elsewhere, for example in Edinburgh, as they did from November 1785 to May 1786, or even to London. They had many months there in the late 1780s. When that happened, Marshall had to make all the practical arrangements. For example, he supervised all the family accounts, the buying, the selling, everything. records of which in Marshall's own hand survive in Register House in Edinburgh. So we read of items purchased for the Duke's 5 daughters: Lady Charlotte, Lady Madeline, Lady Susan, Lady Louisa and Lady Georgiana. Children as they were at the time, these girls would eventually become the Duchess of Richmond, the Duchess of Manchester, the Marchioness of Cornwallis and the Duchess of Bedford, wife of the 6th Duke at Woburn Abbey. Only Lady Madeline missed out on a stellar marriage, though she did quite well. She married Sir Robert Sinclair. Now, I've got here some extracts from the accounts that Marshall handled, and I'm going to read out some bits and pieces because they give you an insight into life at that time and the sorts of things that Marshall had to organise and to deal with. So here we go. When they were in Edinburgh, bills for the young ladies. Making 3 petticoats for Lady Madeline, 3 shillings. Making shifts for Lady Susan, 10 shillings. Making shifts frilled for Lady Madeline, 2 shillings. And then Duke Alexander's bills, they include, among lots of things, 1 oil brush, 1 shilling. 6 strong leather reins and buckles for horse, 9 shillings. 6 collars for horse, and 1 coach whip, 3 and 6pence. 1 horsewhip, 3 shillings. Her Grace the Duchess, well, we have a paper of magnesia, which was 6pence, a paper of gum arabic, 2 shillings, and a box of healing ointment, 6 shillings. Then we have doctor's bills, and these concern Lady Louisa, the 4th daughter as she was, who seems to have had a rather difficult time because she needed 12 vermifuge powders, that's worming powders, they were 2 shillings, 6 purging powders, 9pence, and a paper of sulphur, 4pence. Poor Lady Louisa. Her mother, I've told you that, part of the weekly shopping. Well, among other things, they got 3 pounds of haddock, which was 3 and 9pence, 100 weight of coal, and that was 6pence, eggs, butter, fowls, carrots, spinach, spinage, which I think is spinach, and 1 pound of butter, 11pence, a quarter of tea, lobsters and oysters, 2 shillings, 2 dozen pigeons, no price for them because they were maybe out from a ducat, a loaf of bread, 7pence halfpenny, rhubarb for tarts, no price there again, maybe rhubarb grew in the gardens, 4 bottles of beer, only 4pence, and that's 4 old pence, very good value, 1 salmon, 2 and 9pence, and a peck of oatmeal, which was 11pence. When the Grace visited in 1788, she required quite a lot of things, and among them, to chair hire for Sir William Maxwell, who was her father, 1 shilling, to coach hire for the ladies, 3 and 6pence, to turnpike to Hopetoun House, 1 and 9pence. They would visit there quite often. There were very good terms with the family there. To the waiters, 1 shilling and 1 penny. To the chambermaids, 1 and a penny also. To the laundress, 4 shillings. And to the poor, 2 shillings. Now, nowadays, if we want to travel from Fochabers to Edinburgh, we would get in the car and we'd drive. I think it would take about 2 hours to get there. But in those days, my goodness me, was it not different. Here are the itemised accounts for the journey home to Gordon Castle in 1786. I won't give you all the prices or it'll be too long, but here we go. Ferry South, £1, 7 and 5pence. Ferry North, £1, 13 and 11pence. Perth, stayed all night, £3, 16 and 5pence. Blair Athol, stayed all night. Servant's dinner, Dalwhinnie, stayed all night, £6, 12 and 11, that's quite an expensive one. Servant's dinner, Aviemore, stayed all night, bit cheaper that. Granton, breakfast, £1, 4 and 3pence. Refreshments at Halfway House, 5 shillings. Forres, stayed all night. Elgin, breakfast, 17 and 7pence, bit cheaper that. And chaise hire from Edinburgh to Gordon Castle was £21, 13 and 6pence, so it was expensive. The total here is £62, 4 shillings. And the journey was obviously a long journey and an arduous one. The servants would have to sit outside the coach and through all the weathers, though not Marshall, because as house steward he had certain privileges. He would be inside the coach. Marshall did all this to the highest standard of dutiful efficiency. Over and above that, he married and had 6 children of his own. He continued to expand his knowledge and expertise in practical science, for example in dialing, which was to do with the making of and positioning of sundials, in which Signor Rani, you heard about him, instructed him, mathematics, astronomy, clockmaking. He was an outstanding clockmaker, and one of the best astronomical clocks in Britain to this day was made by William Marshall. Falconry, he trained the Duke's falcons, fishing, and one other art, which we'll come to in the second video. There's no doubt that he was a remarkable man, but he's remembered now for none of the skills I've just mentioned, except maybe clockmaking, but for something else. You can probably guess what that was, but to find out, you'll have to go on to video number 2. As for the videos, there are the 12 which tell you the story, and you can go through all of them, and that's fine. But there are also a number of others which were filmed outdoors. I enjoyed filming outdoors in quite scenic locations, though I may say there are many, many hazards when you try to do that. The wind being one, the music will blow open or shut as you're playing, though clothes pegs are a big help, or it will fall off the stand. You can hear the distant sound of bagpipes, as I did on one occasion, and that went on the video. Perhaps the oddest one was when I was at Melville House, playing outside or just in front of the tree house, which is quite a spectacular thing. And I put the violin case that just left it open on a bench below the tree house. You don't see this in the video, which is a pity, because I heard funny noise while I was playing, and when I got back I found that their very, very beautiful Persian cat was sound asleep inside the violin case. So there you go. Finally, I hope you're all well and happy. This is not an easy time, and it will continue to be so for as long as it takes. A long time, I think. So my very best wishes to one and all. I hope you like the videos.